Recently, we took two Cube Bosch eMTBs to Torridon in northwest Scotland for a big day riding. Different travel, different wheel size. The question is, which was the ultimate tool for the job? Now, the two bikes in question for that trip are this very one, the Stereo Action Team 160 HPC 27.5, and the bike that Adi was riding, the Cube Stereo Action Team HPC 140 TM29. I've got no idea why they got such long names. What I can tell you is they've both got Bosch 4th generation motors and 625 watt-hour batteries. It was really interesting to take the 140 and 160mm travel bike into super technical natural terrain to see which bike performed the best. Now, if you recall, last year we took a white 160 and 180 bike on a massive Trans-Wales trip. And on that occasion, it was actually the longer travel 180mm bike which you reached to later in the day, simply because it was more forgiving on those longer rides. Now, I managed to get a quick reflection of the component specifications of the two bikes at the harbour side at Gairloch, although please bear in mind I was pretty weary from the previous day's effort. So as you can see, the bikes and myself are not so fresh after the last few days. But like I said, it's been really interesting comparing the two bikes amongst what is essentially streams for 8 hours per day. And do you know what? I actually quite like the shorter travel bike in that type of environment. I think that combined with the larger wheels and slightly more flex in the fork on the 36 compared to the 38 on the Action Team bike. In terms of componentry, pretty similar, 200mm rotors, Shimano XT gearing on this bike compared to the SRAM gearing on the 140 bike, 12 speed on both. Now both bikes come with the Newman Evolution wheel set, they're both alloy, but the tyres are quite different on both bikes. The Action Team 160 comes with the Schwalbe Big Betty on the back and the Magic Mary up front. They're both in the Adex soft compound, whereas the 29-inch bike has got a Minion DHR on the back and an Assegai up front. But in terms of grip, I think both bikes have been pretty similar over the last few days. Braking, Shimano XT on the Action Team, and we've got Magura MT7s on the 140 bike. Now, it's quite interesting, these bikes are pretty good value actually. This comes in at 5,899 and the 140 at 4,899. But of course, main part of the both bikes is the fact they've got 630 watt-hour batteries and the 4th generation Bosch motor on there, which kicks at 85 Newton meters. What's really interesting, we never used turbo mode on any of the rides at all. It was simply Tour, like I mentioned, or eMTB. Now, the great thing about the eMTB mode is the fact that if you stand on the pedals when you're in a particularly tricky situation, it'll give you that extended sort of push to get you up some steppy ground. So definitely a great feature to use in mountainous terrain such as this. The 140 bike was definitely more comfortable during the ride. It certainly carried more speed and was softer on the arms and legs. And it didn't get involved in the collisions with the constant rock and route over 10 hours as much as the 160 bike did. The question is though, why did we feel the 140mm bike so much more forgiving in very harsh conditions? Well, I think it comes down to several factors. First up, the 140 bike had larger diameter wheels, which gave increased rollover. Secondly, it was down to the tyres possibly, but nevertheless, both were soft compound. The third reason is the fact that the 140mm bike had smaller diameter Fox 36 forks on it compared to the larger diameter 38 on the 160 bike, which might have given a bit more flex. But it's the internals of those forks. Maybe there was a different damping characteristic to the 36 compared to the 38. And finally, maybe it was simply the fact that the 140mm bike just had a bit more give in the frame. Now, the big problem with making such calls is that they apply to those two bikes in that territory with those riders. On a different day, it might have a different result. And remember, our results, our feelings, should I say, in Scotland were actually contrary to what we felt in Wales when, on that occasion, we preferred the longer travelled bike for the longer ride. All it does is emphasise that you cannot make generalisations about bikes. What we're saying then, on a different day, in different terrain, the 160 bike might well outperform the 140. Nice skills, AD. So physical. Now, not only did myself and AD take two different travel bikes on our adventure into Torridon, at the same time, me and Chris used the same bike, this same Cube stereo, but with different displays for different rides. Now, Chris used the more detailed Nyon display on his ride, or should I say his summer holiday, whilst at the same time, on my more involved, more technical adventure, I used the Kiox display. The Kiox display is a great minimalist display, keeps itself out of trouble, and is a great navigation tool. However, the Nyon is a far more involved bit of kit, loads more detail on this unit. When it comes to planning routes, it will tell you whether you'll be able to get there in a certain mode. But more than this, it'll give you a heads up. Say, for example, you've got a destination planned, it'll be able to tell you whether you need to go into a lower power mode, which will enable you to get to your finished spot. So in short then, the Nyon is slightly more advanced than the Kiox display is. And still, apart from the navigation, both displays do give you a load of detail, such as your mode, your speed, your range, the heart rate that you're using at a certain time during the ride. And one that I really like is the amount of watts you as the rider are kicking out. Many things then, guys, that we've covered today. We've looked at wheel size, we've looked at suspension travel, we've looked at the displays, also some very different types of riding. But nevertheless, all factors for you guys to consider for the cool e-bike adventures that you've got planned.